Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. Dwayne the Great Writer and Seer.
This real side experience would begin with my being present in a university or school-like environment within a study or classroom within it. I would be surrounded by a large number of other individuals. A handful of them I would recognize as school associates from 30 or so years ago, and who I haven't seen or spoken with since to this present moment. These former school colleagues seemed to be preparing to embark on further studies that the university we were in would provide, to apply and commit to a course that would take the years that it would to complete, and they were rather encouraging that I do the same. On the real side, our progress, awareness speaking, our journeys to eventual isness recognition can be represented as our transitioning through various school-like tiers, and as we qualify and graduate to higher expressions of erudition, this is indicative of our awareness becoming more so. For indeed, this is rather a consistent representation and experience as provided by the RealGuides, as shared by many new friends over the years, including myself. For indeed, present also on the real side are the universities, positions established by the RealGuides, and where the sharing of the is pertaining real education and references, and a mutual support for all those on their awareness processes is a constant. On the surface, then, this experience suggested something of a similar nature, that of further courses and learnings necessary, as representing further steps and stages of awareness to attain. For indeed, there is in reality no end to the positioning we can establish for ourselves in the endlessness of the true reality that our real awareness is a part of, as we eventually release the idea attachments that somewhat limit our standing from the full magnitude of our real awareness true selves, then further into the isness as we continue into its endless reality. However, should we have access to our true self, to the real awareness, which is a part of the everything is, a reality that animates through all consciousness, as all the ideas of it are available to the real awareness. We are not then limited to just the surface simulated level, as we would be should we be operating as the isolated and detached from real awareness personal self. We can be apprised of the actuality of our simulated situations, the ideas, the intentionality behind the surface front, and where oftentimes what is taking place as a simulation is not always entirely as it appears to be. Given the dark forces' tenacious and constant watching of our experiences, physical level and real side, so they will determine the nature of certain of the symbology and themes within the unique real side experiential processes the guides take us through, where they can mimic or replicate that which the guides are creating, and where the guide provided experiences are beneficial awareness speaking, the dark force replicated versions will be quite the opposite and serve as taplining mechanisms. For anything featuring as a simulation for the personal self will be so within the creational arenas where potentially any individual can bear witness to also, as every being will consist of the various body vehicles that they do, operating multi-dimensionally as they will, and only the reality of the is and the real awareness that is a part of it, a reality aside from simulation, and more so a reality that is read via impressions, will be denied to those who operate as the isolated personal self and consciousness immersed individual, that every individual is this real awareness being of light in actuality, but it is a choice to connect with it or to remain as the consciousness and therefore limited to the simulation of created ideas, personal self. Impressions suggested that the dark forces had somewhat elected to attempt to set up this simulated situation that of required further education, that on the surface so might it seem similar to the genuine guide presented versions, which are representational of awareness, progress, etc., but was in fact quite the opposite. That were I to have assumed this to be the case, that required was it for me to sign up for further learnings, in actuality I would be extending agreement then to the dark forces whose created situation this was, and effecting for myself circumstances in reflective accordance with the distortion of what such dark force creations are designed to achieve, that being as mechanisms of control and restriction, that every idea in creation that doesn't in some way reference the is actually serves as, and my former school associates were simply unwitting pawns for the dark forces, for they would be individuals locked into what is a dark force managed consciousness, as all human consciousness will be, a consciousness moulded to the dark forces simulation effecting whims, which equates then to agreement to the dark forces and the maintenance of that which they desire, their control of the simulator. Consequently, such human individuals will automatically be operating in ways that support the dark forces, especially other dimensionally, through their various other vehicles and aspects. For as unconscious as they will have no control or indeed realization of how their multi-dimensional aspects will be operating in support of the dark force reptilians through a consciousness as designed by the controllers, that is a maintenance mechanism for their perpetual simulator control. And so, having seen through this effort, I would decline the offer as ventured by my former school colleagues and depart from the university. But then, even were I to have remained and be very likely taplined, and the effects of what was then a dark force orchestrated ruse, every experience, regardless of its nature, ultimately serves the same purpose, that of another viewpoint comparison by which to recognize the true reality from. And for every agreement we do embrace, we have to simply recognize that we were duped by what seemed to be ideas that held merit on the surface, and as we then relinquish the idea, we are liberated from its effects. We are only resigned to situations as we decide that we are, as we hold to the ideas affecting them. The scene would switch, and now I would find myself stationed in what appeared to be a larger complex of laboratories for the purposes of highly advanced technological research, development, and application. Specifically, I was in a kind of lecture room. Present with me would be a Jeremy, and a human in appearance scientist would be delivering information in regards to some of the nature of their work, projects involving extreme longevity of a body form lifespan and duration. Impressions suggested that this was but one area of research and development these scientists were involved in, that they were not ill-intended or dark force affiliated, and although none of the scientists were embracing of their awareness processes, they had no intent set with the recognizing of the all-is, the nature of their work, and indeed how advanced it actually was, if applied honourably, could serve in all manner of beneficial ways. In reality, everything is about awareness. Awareness and the true reality are aside from anything created, any idea as formulated and effected into the simulators, and realistically then, nothing idea-wise is required other than as comparisons to recognize the is by. Our awareness processes do require the simulators, however, as the training grounds by which our real purpose of is recognition can be achieved. And so, should anything as created in the simulators potentially present as a means by which this simulator-based process can be made easier, then these are ideas worth investigating and indeed, where possible, implementing. For survivability through the body forms is something of a necessity, if we are to operate physical level-wise, and the nature of the research as developed by these scientists was in regards to enhancing and making more robust the body forms, including affording them more longevity. A means of which can be so is if body forms are made more resilient in relation to external environmental factors and stressors. There were a number of other body types in the lecture room with Jeremy and myself, all with their own personal self-interests in regards to the projects the scientists were involved with, but as I said, the possibility was to very likely acquisition the scientists' services if they were agreeable, and perhaps their genius and work could be applied where it could prove beneficial, although exactly in what way wasn't made apparent, as though at this stage we were simply taking the first initial steps and making a contact with these scientists. For as I said, their ingenuity and technological know-how wasn't just limited to body form enhancement and longevity. There was one body form present that had the appearance of a kind of limbed slug. I was reminded of the character in Star Wars, Jabba the Hutt. Apparently his body form was deteriorating, hence his interest in the scientist's research, and was literally deteriorating before our eyes and becoming increasingly and excessively bloated. Impressions revealed he would shortly transpire in the room we were in, and never would be able to make use of the science as made available here. In reality, the body forms can be and operate however we decide. A case of installing the ideas, and effected will be their nature. We can develop the consciousness that manifested our body forms with whatever capabilities we desire, including extreme lifespans. But we can equally make use of that which has been created by others, such as by the scientists here in the complex we were in. I would take the opportunity to engage with the ever-expanding in mass slug creature, that despite his appearance, he was far more receptive and open to references his personal self was at that moment unfamiliar with, than every other body form in the room, as all were completely personal self-absorbed with whatever their consciousness of ideas happened to comprise of. For indeed, despite the body form's design, animating through it will be the same real awareness, real intent imperative of his recognition. But I would gauge the necessity of slowly taking the slug being through the references a step at a time. I would be breaking down creation, the life levels, the cause and effect nature of the agreement-based and driven simulators, and the reality of a physical level lifetime body forms, though an awareness that animates through them all, that utilizes them, as we might say, with sets of clothing. Throughout this he would continue to deteriorate, though listening with rapt attention regardless, and would then expire. It seems his particular body type was rather designed that it would bloat and then explode on death, and he made rather the mess consequently. Jeremy would get the worst of it, alas, but no real harm done. The slug creature had been introduced to the real references he was evidently meant to hear, as when we are ready to receive them, generally a new friend, a guide, or other mechanisms of his pertaining reference delivery will feature in our experience, physical level or real side. Impressions revealed that heading this entire operation, this complex of laboratories and technologies, was a particular scientist who would be somewhat regarded as one of the leading simulators' technological geniuses. However, by all accounts, he had transpired himself also. At least, that's what everyone was led to believe. In actuality, he realized that expressions of the dark forces had been watching the progress of him and his team, and were now preparing to steal his research and projects, that they would serve their own continuous controlling and species suppressing agendas. Very likely they had attempted to initially buy the scientist and his team off, but that they were now plotting to acquisition the projects by force, suggested the scientists hadn't been agreeable to the dark force propositions. And so the lead scientist had manufactured his own demise, which was a pretence that assumed dead, so he was in less danger of assassination, unbeknownst to the dark forces that were preparing to descend upon the science complex regardless. I would be operating in a real awareness aside from the simulated circumstances view at this moment, as to feature directly was no longer necessary. Jeremy and I had made the initial engaging first steps with the scientists, and now I would be observing the dark forces' assault on the complex. They would hit a particular part of it where the most sensitive and advanced projects were being developed, what visually appeared as a series of large domes, and contained within would be the projects the dark forces desired to steal. Interestingly, the form the dark force agents would take would comprise of very crudely designed cyborgs, a mishmash of robotic form with that which was organic, not especially pleasing to the eye, but they seemed effective enough as they ransacked several of the domes, but seemingly were unable to lay claim to what they sought, as though a particular project was of interest to them and the dark force masters they were deployed on behalf of. Though systematically they would eventually have but a few domes as yet to investigate, and would smash through one of those that remained. Present within would be the very lead scientist who was the genius behind this entire complex of scientific and technological work, for indeed he should have expired himself, a very aged individual as he was, but had applied his own science personally, that he was afforded practically an unlimited lifespan. He appeared human, with a shock of unruly white hair. The cyborg monstrosities were somewhat taken aback as they recognized the lead scientist, for news of his death had been circulated, though a faked demise, as I said. The moment they entered the dome, they triggered a security system which would freeze the cyborgs in place, immobilizing them completely, and this afforded the lead scientist the time required to gather his papers and research material, destroy the dome's contents, that nothing of his projects remained, the very project material these dark force cyborgs were seeking, and he would fade from the scene as though evaporating into the ethos. Very likely he had activated some portal or other means of extraction and delivered himself into a position far from the science complex, and thus assuring his safety, probably suggesting why I was but observing, as this scientist was very capable and evidently could handle himself and his situations in regards to the impositions of others, and so no need was it for me to intervene into his affairs. Though, as I said, this seemed to present as the first steps of making a contact with these scientists, and very possibly this may develop further, and where this genius scientist and his team may be agreeable to extend their assistance with our galactic beneficial projects, etc.